those who came here. I am an African, born in the Gambia. But I think as we look at each other here, we must have migrated from the East for many thousand years ago. Having said that, I think all that I've heard here, if one was to take the word, replace the word Kenya with other so-called artificial African countries' name, the situation would almost be the same. That is because we are a people with the same cultural identity, but I don't think we have the consciousness of a common cultural identity. I say that because I think it would have been very interesting to have also our brothers and sisters from other parts of Africa here to listen to what we are saying, because the conditions are similar. And this leads me to the question I'm going to ask. One, you were introduced as being part of the Sankara Foundation.
Sankara Center.
Sankara Center. I will be very grateful if you can give some information about that.
Yes.
And the second question is, after listening to the discussion here, I am very, very concerned with the fact that we are faced with the question of a collective annihilation or a collective survival as an African people. But when we look at other peoples of the world, whenever they are faced with the same kind of dilemma, they normally take a very self-critical analysis of themselves and then take positions to correct themselves internally. Then how, from your experiences of how you were introduced, how do we as an African people, faced with this question of survival at this time, improve our networking among ourselves, since we are faced with the same question? And this is a question for Stockholm. How do we improve our networking in Stockholm? How do we improve our networking in Scandinavia and globally? Thank you.
Yeah, so to go back to the Sankara Center, Thomas Sankara, for those of us who don't know him, was a great African. He was a revolutionary. And in 1983, he was part of the Burkinabe Revolution in the country which used to be called Upper Volta, but which he renamed Burkina Faso, the land of people with dignity. In his short life, he died when he was only 36. Yeah, he did a lot of work in terms of that country was very poor, but empowering women, deepening democratic process, creating synergies with at the Pan-Africanist level, at the international level. He was a big inspiration. Now his best friend, Campore, grew up in Thomas Sankara's home. I was being told by somebody I met in Italy who is actually from Burkina Faso and knows both of them. And they grew up like brothers. In fact, in 1983, when Sankara was imprisoned, because he was prime minister before he became the president, and he was imprisoned because they said he was plotting a coup, it was Blaise Compaoré who went and released him. Thomas Sankara once said that if you ever hear that my brother here, Compaoré, is planning something, don't even bother, it will be too late. October 15th, 1987, because of a struggle, because there were about 4 people who are in the leadership of the Burkina Faso revolution. André Zongo, somebody called Lingani, Blaise Compaoré, and Thomas Sankara. They're young people, many of them are paratroopers, but they are all revolutionaries. They fell out, or rather Blaise Compaoré was too greedy for power. He killed his comrades. He sent people and they killed Thomas Sankara and put him in an unmarked grave. And then later on he killed Zongo and Lingani, and he then installed himself as president. And now he took off his military suit and became the civilian president. He was recently re-elected. Now, the dream of Thomas Sankara is the dream of Kwame Nkrumah, of Feli Momi, of Chris Hani, of Ruth First, of Basil February, of Ben Baraka, of all those people, sons and daughters of Africa, who have wanted Africa to be great in a world where people promote social justice and things like that. So it's been a personal inspiration for some of us. And we set up the Sankara Center partly out of our frustration with two processes. One, the mainstream political parties, which in Kenya are not based on ideology, most of them. And also working through NGOs, which became part of almost an industry unto themselves. So we wanted to connect the social movements. And we said we can get our inspiration from Thomas Sankara. So the the Sankara Center for Social Movement aims to, one, empower, build the capacity of social movements. We are focusing on Kenyan social movements, but we work very closely with social movements from other parts of the world. For example, we're collaborating with a small group based in the environs of Johannesburg, South Africa. It's called the Kenya College, whose motto is Education for Liberation. And we're trying to create linkages with people in Latin America, people in India, people all over the world, including Europe and the Americas. And our dream is that people should be able to speak for themselves, whether they're young people, whether they're women, whether they're workers, and things like that. And it's still, I don't want to overstate it, because sometimes people like exaggerating. It's still a very weak organization, it's still very small, but we are getting there. We had a launch during the World Social Forum, where we featured these groups in Parade and other young people from the informal settlements, and we got a group of women who had survived rape at the hands of the British and set up an all-women peace village in somewhere called Laikipia, a place near Archer's Post. So we are still at a very early stage, but that's what it's all about. You are very concerned about the collective annihilation of us as an African people. I think that that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is the attempts that we have made throughout history to get together. This meeting is a small attempt at that. There are many, many such initiatives which are taking place all over Africa, all over the African world. I know that there are black Afro-Brazilians who want to do exchange visits with people in Africa. I know there are African Canadians who are choosing to go to places like Gambia, Ghana, find out about their heritage, make connections. I think that the fact, even sometimes when you go to these meetings, you find that we as Africans sometimes cannot communicate because some of us were colonized by the British, others by the Portuguese. So we find that we have to go to the same white people to be the interpreters so that we can talk to each other. And yet we have Kiswahili, we have Hausa, we have Kula, we have many of the languages that we can use. And I think that the existence of something called the African Union at this point is still state to state. But we are hoping that we can have an African Union also from below. From the 19th to the 21st of June, there's a meeting in Accra, Ghana, organized by the African Union, to try to talk about how civil society organizations can make the connections. Unfortunately, sometimes this information is not disseminated widely. But I'm just saying that we can start doing concrete things like in this city, in Stockholm. I know that's what we used to do in Toronto. So for example, if there's a Gambian National Day, they'll invite Kenyans, they'll invite South Africans. So it will be, even though we are celebrating a particular country's culture and their achievements, it is still seen as an African celebration. And I think that we don't need funding for that. We don't need to take over African governments to do that. Sometimes it's just a question of visiting and hanging out with your fellow African brother or sister and making the connections one-on-one. But I think that there are organizations all over Africa, all over North America, all over Europe, which have that mandate of doing that. And I can say that concretely, at least for you, my brother from Gambia, let's start by exchanging contacts.